Hi, Stitchers. Welcome to Tatreez Talk, where we share conversations about Palestinian embroidery. I'm Lena, here with my co-host Amani, chatting with talented embroiderers and artists, sharing their stories, inspirations, and the cultural significance behind their work.
On today's episode, we are chatting with our friend Samar Hejazi, a visual artist, Tatreez artist, and teacher. Samar, we are so glad to have you here. Welcome to Tatreez Talk.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, Samar, yes, it's such a pleasure, especially after fangirling over your art over Instagram and then meeting you in person. We'll get into all the things. But can you kick us off by telling us a little bit about you and your family's connection to Palestine?
Yeah, of course. So both my parents are Palestinian and their parents are Palestinian. My mom's side is from Nablus, my dad's side is from Jaffa, but um, they grew up, lived in Kuwait and Amman and Syria. Well, no, my mom was born in Syria, but we're the diaspora, Amman, Kuwait, and then eventually Canada.
Mhm.
Yeah, flooded.
How did your parents meet?
They met in Kuwait I guess there's a pretty big Palestinian community, and
Mhm.
they just met. What is the actual, through friends? Yeah, through
Mhm.
a mutual friend kind of hooked them up, and
Mhm.
then they started dating, and then my mom got, the approval from the parents, and then they got married.
And you were born in Canada, or were you born in Kuwait?
I was actually born in the States. I
Oh,
was born in
okay.
Oh,
California. Yeah, my dad didn't have a passport, and my mom had a Jordanian passport. And
Mhm.
I think until now, women can't pass down their nationality.
Mhm.
So we were gonna end up with nothing. So my mom,
Oh, wow.
the soldier that she is, gave birth to my older brother and me in California, which I find strange because I never talk about the States, but then people are like, oh, so where are you born? And I'm like, yeah, so another layer is that I'm American.
Wow, I didn't even
Mhm.
realize that because so your father, he did not have a passport, but he born and raised in Kuwait, or was he born in
He was
Palestine and then
born in Lebanon,
okay.
and they weren't giving, you know, he wasn't
Hmm.
one of the ones that got the Lebanese passport. And so he
Hmm.
had like the Palestinian documentation. I don't know if it what kind of like Hawiye it was
Hmm.
or any of that, but yeah, he didn't have a passport. He didn't get one until, you know, my brother and I were American, and then they tried to immigrate to the States and have my mom and my father, get the passport, but that didn't work. And then they moved to Canada and did their immigration there. And then I think my dad got it after my younger brother was born. Like it took time.
Wow.
hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so but then you grew up mostly in Canada.
I grew up so we were based in Saudi when I was born. And then we moved to Canada uh, when, the immigration thing wasn't happening. And then I was in Canada till grade four. What is that?
Mhm.
Like 10? Then
Yeah.
moved to Dubai. Yeah, I know. Oh, how would 100 decades ago? No. Um, and then so we left Canada, came to Dubai. I was here until I was 17 and then went back to Canada
Oh,
for
wow.
university and then stayed and then came back to Dubai like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your
Wow.
parents now are based.
So my dad was based in Qatar because like
How many countries can we
This
add?
is so
even
Palestinian
when
though.
even when we lived in Canada, he wasn't there that often. He
Hmm.
was
Okay.
doing the days he had to do, but his work was based in Saudi, Kuwait, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then he moved to Dubai, and then it was Qatar. And now my mom actually is still in Toronto. She
Wow.
loves, the Canadian life. Like she has her life, after you
Yeah.
spend
Yeah.
so much time there, her friends and her activities and her whatever. So
Yeah.
she's still there.
Totally.
Mm.
So what was it like for you then? So kind of, living both within the Arab diaspora and then in North America, what was it like for you to like identify with your Palestinian identity? What did that mean to you?
Actually, it's interesting that you would bring that up because that's why I started working in Tatreez and doing, the through my visual art practice. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was me trying to understand what it meant
Mm-hmm.
because at that point when I was really thinking about it, I had spent this was like my early 20s and there wasn't really much sign that I was going to come back to the Middle East. And whenever I would travel to Amman to visit my grandparents or the rest of the family, I was always like the ajnabiyya, like I was always the foreigner. And
Yeah.
then when I would go to Canada, I felt like a foreigner still,
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there was this moment where I realized that the only thing that proved that I was Arab was my name because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't say anything, about my, ancestry or my lineage in your passport. It doesn't even say if you're Muslim or not that that matters, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no, I was born in California,
Yeah.
my name is Samar, but a lot of, Americans would call me or Canadians would call me Summer, trying to say, or Samar,
Mm.
and so, and the only thing left was Samar Muhammad Hejazi, which was my name
Mm-hmm.
on my passport. So I was kind of like, where
What does that
where
mean for
where what
you?
does that mean and where do I stand? And
Yeah.
like, so I am the proof, but only through my story, not even through any kind of like legal documentation. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's when I started exploring, like, okay, what does it mean to have this identity, and what does a nation mean, and what does a home mean, and what does empire mean, and why are these
Mm-hmm.
definitions like not for me?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I feel at home in two different places, why can't I? And
Mm-hmm.
then so that's when I would use the practice
Mm-hmm.
to kind of figure that out.
And how did Tatreez become the thing? How did you stumble upon Tatreez to become that medium?
Honestly, it was so I was almost resistant
Mm-hmm.
because at the time I was doing sculpture and my parents were already not completely convinced about the whole fine arts thing to begin with. Like I went into school for architecture and then I dropped out and I switched kind of without telling them at
I love it.
because I just felt like, well, it's fine. They're not
Yeah,
here. It's this is a later problem when
100%.
later comes, which was in
Yes.
2 years. But like, when you're that
It
young,
came
you're like,
fast.
whatever, whatever. I'll be happy I have a degree. So I was doing sculpture, and that's like Arabs, we have this thing where it's like, oh, it's
Hmm.
Western and it has this, more of a presence. And at the
Mm.
time, Tatreez wasn't that cool, like
Hmm.
Yeah.
nobody was doing it. Nobody was
Hmm.
understanding that it was like an important cultural practice. You
Hmm.
know, if you if you were into Tatreez, you buy Tatreez, you don't necessarily Tatreez, at least in
Yeah.
our family. And my grandmother used to run this Palestinian Heritage Center in Amman, and she founded it with another lady, and they had Tatreezers, like
Hmm.
from the camps that they would hire to do the twab and stuff like that. So it, I knew that I wanted to do something to connect me to my identity, and I knew it wasn't going to be cooking because
Same, girl, same. No,
Yeah.
no need to explain.
Yes.
Same.
wasn't gonna happen. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do Tatreez. And then I was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna be able to do this like from sculpture, whatever? So I looked for embroidery, you know, um, places that where I could learn, and I found a residency in Mexico that taught embroidery. I couldn't find a residency in Amman or
Yeah.
anywhere like that where I would actually have an embroiderer teach me for hours on end. So I actually learned embroidery in Mexico, and I took my Tatreez book and everything, and I went and I had told the organizers of the residency that, I mean, my goal is to learn Palestinian embroidery, and, you know, naively was like, by the end of the residency, it was like 4 weeks, I'm gonna do a dress with
Love it. Yes.
you know,
Ambition. Yes.
it's gonna be blah and blah. It's gonna be sculptural. It's gonna be, you know, take up, you know, 6 feet of floor space. And the director was like, yeah, okay. The goal is for you just to come and we'll work on your concept and you'll learn the tech. Don't think about the end. Like, he didn't want to tell me that, like,
it's not gonna happen.
like I would still be embroidering that piece now.
Yeah.
So I went, and that's when I first started learning from the Spanish Mexican lady that only spoke Spanish. And then did I answer your question yet?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like, I forgot the question. Yeah, and then it was after that that I went to Amman and I learned the official way to do it.
Okay, wait. Okay, so what was that experience like learning embroidery from a Mexican woman who only speaks Spanish with the goal of learning Tatreez? Like, I'm trying to envision that
Yeah.
experience.
Oh, it was hilarious. So it was like 3 hours every other day, but then I had to go home and repeat everything that I did. And she wasn't just gonna teach me cross stitching.
Yeah.
She was gonna teach me all the things. I didn't know what fabric to use. I didn't know, and let alone now everything is in Spanish. And back then it wasn't like roaming data plans were that common.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she didn't have Wi-Fi at home, obviously. Not obviously, but she just, we were in, most of it was done outside, to be honest. Anyway, so I would write down on a piece of paper all the words that I could possibly need in English and Spanish. And so we would sit and I would put this like dictionary that I created, like thread, needle, you know, pull, knots, you know, stuff like that. And we would just like go through the words.
Wow.
And, like,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
so yeah, it was fun. I mean, I feel like I spoke Spanish, but I don't think I did. I think that I was just one of those people that confidently would just blah, 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 and she was just like, whatever, man.
You guys made it work though, so that's what matters.
Yeah, we made it work. But yeah, it was fun. It was cool. And then in the end, I showed her the book, and for the last week we did we tried to replicate, you know, the motifs, but we hardly got to the cross stitching part. From the fabric to, you know, there's a lot in textile art. Like, there's a lot of stitches and a lot of like things you need to understand about thread and the types of fabric and how they drape and what you can or you cannot do. And yeah.
And did you learn like traditional Mexican embroidery as well, or was it just like trying to focus on Tatreez?
Yeah. No, they had their own program and they were like, once you get through this, then we can do your thing. But either way,
so cool.
it's like a base. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't even needle the thread. Like half an hour of the class was just me like trying to get the, you know,
I still
and
struggle
trying to
with
make
that, don't
jokes about
worry.
it in Spanish, which didn't work either.
You practice your embroidery and your Spanish. I love it. So then from Mexico, you said you eventually went to Amman and kind of learned more of the traditional Tatreez, the traditional Palestinian way. Like what was that like? What was that journey? Who were you learning from?
So because my grandmother used to run this center, she had a woman that was working there that offered to teach me. And so I went to Amman for like, I think it was 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One summer or 4 to 6, I can't remember anymore. And the lady would come and teach me because my grandmother doesn't doesn't embroider.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and that's when I saw like that's when I was interested in the difference in the technique, the way things are taught, and this
Mm-hmm.
like feeling of needing to preserve a specific way of doing embroidery, the Palestinian way. You know what I mean? Like there
Mm-hmm.
isn't that kind of fear or anxiety or like this stress or desperation of loss that
Mm-hmm.
in Mexico that you know I felt when I was learning
Mm-hmm.
in Palestine in
Mm-hmm.
Amman,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which conceptually I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then after you picked up Tatreez, how did it then find its way into your visual art or, your previous art, goals and practice?
So I then started trying to like to express what I was feeling as a Palestinian being, a diaspora and being, from so many different places, but also, yeah, like feeling at home in so many different places and not at home at the same time. So I was trying to get the feeling out of the textiles.
Mm.
So of course, the taking it apart was kind of this process of me trying to understand like what's behind it, what does it mean,
Mm-hmm.
and also like taking apart the definitions of like what it means to be from a place, or what does it mean to have a nation, or what does it mean to have a land, or what does it mean to have a community. Like, do Palestinians not exist just because they don't have the land under their feet, or and how is it that they connect? And so the textiles were my way of kind of asking these questions and kind of experimenting and exploring. So if the thread still, for example, with my pieces where there's no fabric, um, it's kind of like, can threads hold themselves together
Mm.
without the foundation, which is the fabric? So to
Mm-hmm.
me, it was like, can people or a culture or a community hold itself together without this land that, that we have been taught is the thing that holds people together and makes you an identity that is allowed to exist. And then it did hold itself together. And for some reason, I felt like, oh, interesting. And, you know, the unpredictable, answers that I'm getting are making me feel like I can accept things because I can go against these fabricated definitions that are
Mm-hmm.
fabricated for us to not feel connected or worthy or valued or, a community or a culture or like that we even exist. And then the beauty of it was that then came the shadows and the lighting and the movement. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so multi-layered the way that we can exist, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So
So
I'm taking a little step back just because as you were talking about when you were in Amman and learning from, these women who were teaching you, quote unquote, the right way, the traditional way, what are some of the things that they taught you that were like, I guess for them, quintessentially Palestinian that you were then able to infuse into your visual art practice?
um so I think you guys are going to know what I'm going to say, but like, for example, like the cleanliness of the back of the
Hmm.
work,
Hmm.
the methodology, like, systematizing and planning. It was all almost like, it was like taking a creative practice and
Hmm.
then making it kind of a little scientific-y, not
Yeah,
Yeah.
word,
I relate.
you know? So it was that rigidity
Hmm.
that made me want to take it apart because I would
Mm.
I would be like, why are we so rigid? Oh, because we're afraid.
Yep.
Okay, so what if I ruin it? Ruin it in the eyes of whoever. Are we still okay? We can redefine, you know, like what if I pull them apart? Is this still whole? Or are we now, you know, broken or whatever?
Mhm. You know, we often talk about like storytelling through Tatreez, whether it's traditional or how we do it today. And I love how you have, you know, taken your own spin on this very traditional practice and made it your own and like spun it. Because like I love, like I remember coming across your work a few years ago through Instagram. And I loved seeing the work that you do with the distorted, pulled apart Tatreez pieces. And now hearing I didn't even know the kind of the backstory behind it. I just visually thought it was so interesting, and I came up with my own stories. And hearing your story, I think makes it so much more powerful.
Oh.
I'm curious to hear like what like taking you know, that's kind of where you've been at. What are you working on like now in that space, and where are you innovating with the threes there?
Now I think it's more, I haven't started this because right now
Mhm.
I'm working on commissions, which is great. Also just a lot of repeating.
Mhm.
I think I want to get more into the materiality, so working more with like metals, or so what would make the thread stronger, you know,
Mhm.
welding and you know things like that
Mhm.
to show kind of, how do I explain this? That I don't know, to kind of, I don't know, bring out more of like the power and the strength that comes behind these practices that are considered, you know, a soft, reflective,
Mhm.
you know, practice or meditative thing that women did to pass time and whatever. But now, not now and always, but now we can see more clearly the effort. So I maybe, yeah, switching it up, moving into metals, moving into different plastics. Yeah.
So cool. Okay, so what does your creative process look like? So like the one that you described before earlier, and I was just like in awe taking, I was like trying not to keep my mouth open because I was just like listening to every word that you were saying. I was like, wow. Because I'm like you and Manny, I did not know I that wasn't what I had felt when I like it is, but it was not in those words. So hearing it from you was really, really powerful. So what was that creative process like? Like how did I mean, not necessarily technically, but I don't know, like how do you get into this zone? How do you come up? How do you get inspired? How do you follow through?
Um, so I think it always starts from this like very almost like childish, rebellious feeling
Mhm.
where it's almost like I've always been a little bit like the rebellious type, but the quiet rebellious, you know, little sassy and
Changing
like,
your
you
major
know,
without telling anyone.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I wasn't like, I hate architecture. I was more like, I'm just gonna switch.
I love it.
But yeah, so it's more like you know, it comes from I'm frustrated. This feels like this texture or that thing, and I want to rebel quietly and kind of like pick things apart and then see intuitively what I'm drawn to. Like a
Mm.
lot of my choices are really about the what I'm drawn to in a tactile way. There was a point when I was doing ceramics not long ago, and I would just touch the clay and nah, this is not it. This is
Mm,
not where I want to go right now.
yeah.
And then switch it. And so a lot of it is like play and sampling and you know little bits of things that look a little bit gross and don't really make sense to anybody hanging in my studio, and then slowly they become this thing, but it's a really playful, you know, rebellious like I don't agree, and so I'm gonna try it this way.
I love it.
I
Yeah.
like that. It's very risk averse. It's like whatever, let's just try something, or I guess not risk averse. I don't know what I'm saying. But
No, but
I
I know
like
what you mean because like when people would see that I'm cutting up Tatreez pieces, they'd be like, What are you doing? Aren't
yeah.
you, doesn't it break your heart?" I'm like, yeah, a little, but like, whatever. It's annoying me that it's so perfect and we're always
Mm.
Mm,
making everything so perfect and everything has to be so perfect. but it's not perfect, and it's
Mhm.
okay. You know, trying to be so perfect is making me feel very imperfect, to be honest.
Mm.
So let's just mess it up, but just a little.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Just a little.
just a
just a
little
little. Let's just
bit.
tear it, tear it
Dip
apart.
it in resin, just a little.
Oh my God, no, someone I need to adopt some of that from you. Like I'm still working on that.
Yeah, but you know, the irony is when I teach Tatreez, I'm really uptight.
Yeah.
Like I've
I
been
remember
trying
we
to
talked
chill
about
out.
that. Yes.
Like when I'm teaching it, I'm like, no, show me the back. Oh, no, oh.
So actually leading into that, so you are now teaching Tatreez, right? So
Yeah.
how did that start? When did you kind of feel this calling to start teaching?
Literally, a cousin called and said, I want to learn Tatreez. That's so funny that you would say that. And I think we would hang out on Sundays and they brought it up a couple times. And then I was just like, sure, you know, maybe it's a good thing. Right now, I think it's important, more important than before. And it'll be, you know, I'm very isolated in the studio, so it'll be nice to have a community and also to do something, you know, Palestinian that's not angry,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and not perpetuating the pain,
Mm-hmm.
but more kind of having a more reflective space where you're connecting as opposed to just fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And ironically, I only taught that cousin once. And then
They disappeared.
was gone.
Wait, so was that in Dubai or was that in Canada?
Yeah, I was in Dubai.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you didn't start teaching till you moved to Dubai.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I wonder why. You know, the thing is, I used to think that this is weird to say, but other people were more kind of
Yeah.
worthy of teaching, you know? I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, why should I teach
Mm-hmm.
when there are so many other people that, you know, can tell you what motif this is and where it came from and, you know, how to combine them in like 2 seconds and, you know, but then I started and now I'm just like, well, here I am. So
Well, so how does it compare? How does it compare to your creative process, like where you're just creating for yourself?
I'm a lot more experimental. Like it's really just, you know, play and if you mess up, it's okay. And oh, maybe the mess up is a success. You know, I'm very like, oh, whatever, let's move with the mistake, you know? Oh,
Mm,
there's a knot, use it or stretch it or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's very
yeah.
responsive. It's like I'm constantly responding to the work or whatever I'm doing when I'm in my studio. But with Tatriz, uh, in the beginning when I'm teaching, I'm not responding to anything. It's like this is how it's done. And
Mm-hmm. It's more
yeah,
regimented.
yeah.
Yeah. Are you, so I guess one question about teaching too, like because it is, you have this kind of like very regimented view when you teach, which I know you and I talked about a little bit when we were in Dubai because I'm a little bit of the same way. Um, but because you have like this view of okay, this way of teaching, how have your students kind of responded? Do you see them being rebellious or are they falling in line?
Yeah, and the thing is, I never saw myself as that person that was like, rigid, you know? And then I was, which kind of makes sense because the part of me that's rebelling is rebelling against another part of me that's more strict, obviously, you know?
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So I had one student send me like a reel of somebody saying, you know, that it's okay to mess up. It's what makes it human and whatever. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. It's just, I feel like there was like a joint understanding in between all the people that are teaching that we have to be uptight. That's how I felt.
I love it. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Like nobody
That's too
saw,
funny.
everybody I showed, like they would just flip it and check the back. So did the same. I felt like it's not
Same,
like
girl,
for me,
same.
you know, if I was doing it for me, I would be like, whatever, just play, let's see. But it's not for me. I'm doing it for the culture. Like, I can't be like, whatever.
Oh my God, I'm dying. Doing it for the culture. Yes. That's why we are judgmental khatos for the culture.
Turned into like a like I don't know, a dictator type like teta. I don't know what's
Oh my God. I love it. Okay, then what's your favorite part of teaching?
um I love the community aspect.
Mm,
I really do love that. I love um connecting with people over a common cause, let's say, but also a common craft.
mhm.
And I love seeing the progress.
Hmm.
It just makes me, I'm just like, this is so, you know, beyond. And you're around people that are, you know, like-minded and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, basically that's the best part, I think. The connection.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so if someone were in Dubai right now and they wanted to learn from you, how could they find out about your upcoming classes? Do you have kits? Do you have other things kind of going on for people in Dubai?
Yeah, the kits are currently sold out, uh,
Oh,
which is
good.
great, but also it's not that great. It's just because I haven't made more. Um, but if you just go on my Instagram, the schedule is pinned up. But I'm also very flexible. So if a student can't do a day, they could just private message me and we'll book something. Yeah. Um, yeah, just on Samar Hejazi, my Instagram, or Tatreez.samar. Either one works. Yeah.
We'll make sure to like link all of that information for people so that they can get in touch. And you said you do one-on-one classes, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'll do one-on-one.
All right. So if you need that extra help, she will judge your backs in private.
No, I'm
So
trying to be better. You know, the other problem with the group classes is if when you have more than one, is that some people go home and practice. Also, some people have other skills,
yeah.
but students compare themselves all the time. So one student will get it almost quickly, and then the
Mhm.
other one won't. And then the next class, they'll be like, am I like exceptionally bad at this? And I'm like, no,
Oh,
you're not. You're not. It's okay. Trust me.
yeah.
I had a lot of trouble in the beginning, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I always tell people that I'm like, when I first started, especially because I learned on my own at first, I had no concept of stitching strategy or what you should like, like what colors you should be using for certain, like if you wanted to go the traditional route. And like my things were a hot mess at first, like a hot mess. But you learn, you practice, you
Yeah.
improve, or you get to a point where you're just happy with whatever you create, whether it's quote
Yeah,
unquote perfect or not.
that's the thing too. It doesn't have to be, at this incredibly high level. You just need to do what feels good.
Oh,
Hmm.
it feels good.
I say
Yeah.
that after I check the back and the
Me too, girl. It's okay. We're working on it. We're working on
yeah,
it.
I'm trying.
Oh my goodness, Selma, this is so fun. So I'm just conscious of time and I want to be respectful of your time. We usually end our episodes with the question, are there any major life lessons that you've taken from Tatreez?
Yeah, Tatreez is a very meditative and slow practice.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to not think about the final product and enjoy the journey. You know how they always say
Yeah.
that? All that self-help about life, like just enjoy the process, just enjoy the journey. And you're like, okay, but at the end of when does the journey end?
That's so funny. It's this, you're just reminding me of like when you went to Mexico and you were telling them, oh, I'm gonna do this whole thing. And they're like, okay, sure. They handled
You're
it
like,
really
that's
well.
so cute for you. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, that's
Live
so
in your
sweet.
Delulu state.
So naive. Don't tell her she can come with us. Yeah, no, so then that was the lesson, right? Because
Yeah.
I would embroider for hours, and my stress and the meditative part of wanting to see the end, my shoulders would tense and the voices, and I was so like, you know, intense.
Mhm.
And then Tatreez taught me to chill out because it's like when you're on a 14-hour plane ride and you want it to end, you can't think about
Yeah.
the end at the beginning
Yeah.
or in the
Yeah.
middle. Maybe in the last hour you can.
Yeah.
When you start seeing the finish line, you can get excited.
Exactly. Yeah.
Until then, enjoy the journey.
Until then, it's not gonna end. So
So you're hilarious. Thank you so much for being here. We enjoyed chatting with you so much. We'll definitely have to chat with you more next time. And as you continue on with your Tatreez journey, I'm really excited to see kind of the next iteration of the work that you were kind of hinting at. So I'm really excited to see what you come up with next. But thank you so much for being here, and inshallah, we'll talk to you soon.
thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Wow, it's incredible to hear Sama talk about her art in that way, like putting words to it, because and we were talking about this offline, but you know, we seeing something on Instagram is not the same. And it was
Yeah.
always like, you know, with Tatriz, I feel like it's more, oh, you know, the woman has a story that she's telling, or maybe she's experienced, like I remember, I forget who we were talking about, but who we were talking to, but you know, oh, they were experiencing something in life and that will forever be preserved in the stitches. But
Hmm.
hearing Sama describe like her art from a conceptual person, it's like a little bit, it's different, right?
Hmm.
And if we didn't have this conversation, that piece that we saw on Instagram, like there's no justice given to it. You know, like this was so good. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing it, those pieces that she's referencing, that are those pieces. I don't know if the proper is like the collection, whatever. But that work is what I originally saw from her. Like I originally stumbled upon her work that way on Instagram, and I just thought it was so beautiful and like,
Hmm.
oh my God, this is so cool. And I had my, like I said, when we were talking about,
Yeah.
I had my own ideas of like what it represented, but I'm gonna be honest, it definitely was not as deep and smart as what she as what she had to say. And so yeah, it's like it's so important, I think, with the like the visual of seeing something is also hearing the artist's story behind it. So it's really cool to have her here to chat about that. And like overall, I mean, we met Samad when we were in Dubai. We got to hang out with her for a little bit, and even again before I met her in person, I was following her on Instagram, and I just always thought, and I still think, like, someone's so cool.
Yes, yes.
She's definitely cool, and I feel like that's one of the things that I always saw, which I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it does kind of tie back into a little bit about what she said about herself. Was one of the things I saw in her artwork, again before hearing her story, was like the rebellion, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
because like it is so beautiful, and then like the tearing and the not the tearing I should say, but like the appearance of it being distorted and torn apart. I just thought that was so cool, and so rebellious. And yeah, and then hearing her story about it, it's like, oh wow, it's also very beautiful and deep and meaningful. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad that she was able to share that with us.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's like we felt what she was doing, but we
Hmm.
would never have been able to put words against it.
Yeah.
And then as she describes rebellion, and I'm actually so glad we got into like her upbringing and
Yeah,
her like, you
yeah.
know, her growing up and stuff, because now it's like, oh, duh, you know, like obviously this is why it ended up being this way. It was we felt it, we just didn't know
Hmm.
what words were there to describe that feeling. Yeah, so good. Love it.
Yeah. Hopefully, I look forward to being able to see one of Sama's exhibits, or many of them, in person in the future. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening to Tatreez Talk. Of course, as always, we want to hear about your own Tatreez journey. So please share your stories with us. Our email is tatreeztalk@gmail.com. We might have you up on one of our upcoming episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Of course, leave us a 5-star review and only a 5-star review. You could follow me at Min Amani and Lina at Lina Stob. And of course, you could follow the podcast at Tatreez Talk. We will talk to you soon.